Cassie was 16 years old, a junior at Pocatello High School in Idaho. She was responsible, well-liked and close with her family. On September 22, 2006, her aunt and uncle asked her to house-sit while they went out of town. Cassie was excited. It was a big step in trust. She planned to spend the weekend at the house, feed the pets and take care of everything. That Friday night she invited her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, over to keep her company. They watched movies and hung out in the living room. At one point, two classmates, Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, stopped by. They were friends from school. Both 16, both a little quiet, a little offbeat. They stayed for about an hour before saying they had to leave to catch a movie. But they never went to the theatre. Instead, they hid outside the house. Earlier that day, they had unlocked a basement door so they could return undetected. Armed with knives, wearing masks, and recording their thoughts on a camcorder, they prepared to make their fantasy a reality. Cassie and Matt continued their evening, unaware of what was happening below. Then the power went out. It flickered, came back on, then went out again. The lights in the house were controlled by a fuse box in the basement. Cassie got nervous. She didn't like the feeling of the place in the dark. Matt called his mum. She said he could come home. But Cassie, being responsible, said she had to stay with the house and the animals. He left around 10:30 p.m. Cassie was alone. Brian and Torey waited a little longer. Then, wearing dark clothing and carrying knives, they came upstairs. They found Cassie lying on the couch. They attacked her, stabbed her repeatedly. She tried to fight, she tried to run, but it was hopeless. They stabbed her 29 times. At least 12 of the wounds were fatal. They left her body in a pool of blood. Then they went to a friend's house and watched a movie as if nothing had happened. The next morning, Cassie's family returned to a nightmare. Her body was discovered in the living room. Blood soaked the carpet. Furniture had been knocked over. The scene was brutal, violent, and senseless. People began questioning everyone who had seen her last, starting with her boyfriend. Matt was devastated. He told them everything he could. He mentioned that Brian and Torey had stopped by the night before. Detectives followed that lead. When police questioned Brian Draper, he denied everything at first, said they left after watching part of the movie. Torey said the same, but police kept pushing. Eventually Brian cracked. He confessed to being involved, but claimed Torey did the actual stabbing. Then Torey was confronted and he also confessed, blaming Brian in return. Both boys led police to a remote area where they had buried the evidence, the knives, the masks, gloves, and the camcorder. On the tape, they had documented everything. Hours before the murder, they filmed themselves planning it. They talked about how they wanted to kill someone, how it was going to be Cassie, and that they would be famous. They said she was perfect for this plan. They compared themselves to characters from horror films like Scream. They talked about how it would be worth it. And after the murder, they recorded again, calmly describing what they had done. It was chilling, it was calculated, and it was premeditated, beyond doubt. Both boys were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. During their trials, each tried to minimize his role, blaming the other. But the evidence was overwhelming. The tapes showed they had planned it together. They had watched horror movies, studied serial killers, and written out their fantasies in notebooks. They didn't kill out of anger. They didn't kill for money. They did it to see what it felt like. In 2007, both Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik were found guilty. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cassie's family never recovered from the loss. She had had her whole life ahead of her, a future full of promise, joy and love. She was targeted not because of anything she did, but because two classmates wanted to live out a horror movie fantasy. They turned her final moments into a nightmare and left behind a legacy of grief and disbelief. The case shocked the nation. It raised questions about the influence of violent media, the signs of sociopathy in teens, and how someone so young could carry out something so heartless. But ultimately, no one could explain why, because some things can't be explained. Cassie Jo Stoddart was a daughter, a student and a friend. She did everything right, and she still became a victim. If you see signs that someone is fascinated with violence, if someone talks about hurting others or jokes about murder, take it seriously. Speak up, tell someone, because lives don't get a second take. And horror isn't a movie when it happens in real life.